Welcome to our special segment, Starting Block, where we take a look at startups and remarkable new innovations. And this time, we're going to take a look at the business of fur, which has been targeted by animal rights activists. But now one company is hoping to change an industry that has been accused of abusing animals for profit. Mark New has that story.
It's estimated more than 100 million animals are killed for fur to supply the fashion industry each year. But with new bans on the fur trade in places around the world, including in California, many customers have turned to synthetic fur, a global market expected to be worth $720 million in 2 years.
People thought, oh, plastic fur is just, it's fine. You kind of solved for the main part of like not killing the animal, but then you did not solve for the second most important part, which some people even consider the most important part, the planet.
Biofluff is solving that problem by taking to the fields to utilize agricultural waste, everything from nettle to flax, a process that's very secretive.
Imagine in a lab setting, it would require, let's say, different enzymes, different, let's say, containers where the fibers would move from one container to the other container to receive the enzymatic but also chemical treatments that they need to then be softer or to change their surface properties to be more like keratin-based animal hair. We're using natural green chemicals, so there are no harsh or petrol-derived chemicals in our process.
These are the groundbreaking samples.
A short version of the natural fiber that we are using to create the first plant-based fur. What you have here on yours is the long version of a completely natural-based white fur imitation. Tries to imitate a fox fur or something longer like a raccoon or maybe a coyote. And from this base material, we then start to create color, to add color in a dyeing process using mostly natural dyes. And we can go as crazy as, for example, this kind of very colorful variation of fur, which is probably can be called a fantasy fur.
Stubler says their material is getting close to the durability of synthetic fur and to the softness of animal fur.
This is the softness that we can achieve with our material, completely based on natural plant-based fibers.
But they can adjust softness, strength, and texture to what the customer wants.
So this is usually what's used for like the collar part or the hoodie of a bomber jacket.
One major advantage of this material is that at the end of its lifespan, well, it can be composted over a several-week process and completely biodegrade. Or even if it was just left as waste in the ground, as moisture set in, it would disappear in about a year. Stubler says Biofluff is currently working with brands like LVMH and aims to have their material in a coat this year for Stella McCartney under its brand Savion. Stubler says right now their production costs are lower than animal fur but still higher than synthetic fur. But Biofluff hopes more customers will find it worth the cost since it's one that doesn't come at the expense of the planet. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
Okay, to talk more about how technology can help with sustainable fashion, we're joined by Naika Colas. She is the Assistant Professor of Fashion Design and Associate Director of MPS Fashion Management at Parsons School of Design. Thanks for coming on our program. We certainly appreciate it.
You're welcome. How are you?
I am great. I hope you're doing well as well on this Friday night. Now, are we seeing a big shift in the fashion industry toward more sustainable alternatives? Because, look, there's a huge difference between a fad and a trend.
Absolutely. So for 2024, the percentage has gone up about 2,000 or 200% in terms of what's trending on your TikToks, your Instagrams. When we're viewing data and different insight points, it's just showing that a lot of our influencers and fashion designers are tapping into bio-based furs, and Biofur is one, Callebs is another, and brands like Stella McCartney have tapped in and created a fully bio-based fur jacket in 2023, the fourth quarter. And so a lot of brands are tapping into the space, one, because it is cruelty-free, but also because it reduces the emissions significantly.
You know, and I think it's interesting about Stella McCartney, and I really wanted to point this out. I'm glad you brought up her name because obviously her father, Paul McCartney, and her late mother, Linda McCartney, very, very involved in animal rights. They've been vegan for years and years and years, so really no surprise that the daughter is following this trend. How significant is it that somebody with that name is really out there championing this?
It's as significant. Like Stella McCartney is one of the top sustainable fashion brands in the world. And so just taking that step and having in terms of, where her competitors stand, I think this is really significant, right? Because not only are they understand different trends and what's coming out and what the different colors and the feel that the consumer is looking for, they're also conscious of their consumer and their competitors. And so they're tapping into Biofurs, and Koba is also another brand that, brands like LVMH. Not only that, brands like Prada have stopped using fur.
Okay.
I think it's not.
It's interesting. I don't know. I'm sure you could hear Mark New's story, but I found it fascinating that they're really talking about how significant the formula, the method of creating this is really a trade secret. So how common are plant-based furs in the fashion industry, and how competitive is it these days?
Well, plant-based furs are not really common. So there's a few brands that would say that they're the first to do it, like the two that I had mentioned. So I would say that they're common. Usually it's petroleum-based furs, so using certain types of natural resources that are being used. So when we say like our vegan leathers or different types of fur, we're using their plastic-based furs. But these two are made from nettle, hemp, and flax. And so that's why it's a significant difference, right? Because
Right.
one, they're biodegradable and all of the other things in terms of emissions.
Naika, how much time have you had to spend around plant-based fur? And what's it feel like? Does it really feel like the real thing? Because I'm sure that has to be one of the selling points.
Yeah, it's not as heavy as fur. It does feel similar, but it's not, I wouldn't say 100%. So it's not the same, but because the Gen Zers and millennials are tapping into the space of sustainable living, and when they're spending their dollar, they're very conscious of how they're spending. So sustainability, just knowing that that's not just about the environment, it's also about animal cruelty and all the different aspects of sustainability that these consumers are really focused on. So it's definitely, I can see it in the future.
And Naika, you talked about the two biggest things. One, the environment, and secondly, the allegations of animal cruelty that certainly have been out there for quite a bit of time. So how profitable is something like this? And is it sustainable, or is it just in its infancy and trying to see where exactly it's going to go?
So it is profitable when it comes to fur, not faux fur, but animal-based fur. It's about a $40 billion industry. And I think by 2030, this industry of faux fur will be, it's about projected to be about 25 billion. So it is profitable. And also for the consumer, it just costs less. And it is, in terms of emissions, it's about 60+% less carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. So I think it's a win-win for using this product. Yeah.
And yes, I'm glad you talked about the young people out there as well looking at this right now, because the United States has perhaps more climate deniers than any other country in the world right now. And of course, there are going to be people out there, probably closer to my age, who say, I would never wear some plant-based fur. I want the real thing. I want to feel elegant. I want to look great. What do you say to those people?
Well, I would ask them, why? What are the reasons why? And then I would show them the influencers and then the celebrities and the fashion designers that are actually out there creating these pieces and wearing them, and show them the savings. So a faux fur jacket that you can get for possibly, let's say $300 as opposed to like 10,000 plus. I think that's a huge difference. And when it comes to looking elegant, you're still looking, it's still the same look, right? You just have to actually know how to style the look so that it can look as high quality as your animal-based furs, right? So I think that's also something that I would tell my mother, right? So I think that's really important, styling it and understanding that trend is it's not over yet, but it's heading there. So.
It's a day perhaps has come and gone. Let's talk about sustainable tech to look out for in 2024.
So sustainable technology, I would say a lot of different ways to use different dyes, especially when it comes to faux fur or bio-based fur. There's different dyes that are being used with different chemicals and natural, like vegetables and vegan dyes. I would also say using generative AI in the space of sustainability, and that's in the procurement process when you're thinking of your supply chain. There's also different processes of using different fibers or natural fibers, like your lyocell fibers, and using a bio-based down instead of using a goose or so. So there's different types of technology that's out there, especially, and we'll see it a lot more in 2024, even using, algae. I know some, if you're in the space of fashion design, you're familiar with algae fabric and fabric that's made with wood pulp and plastic, recycled plastic bags that, we're now leaving that phase of saying, let's say that it's RPT recycled plastic for these shirts. We're actually using natural fibers now. So there's different technology that we're using, and we're tapping into the space of generative AI.